All right, and we're recording. So thanks everyone for joining for our 52nd edition of the Service Fabric Community Monthly Q&A. We have Peter and others from the team joining us today. Quick reminder that this call is being recorded and we will share the recording after the meeting is concluded shortly afterwards. We'll also take any questions or comments in the chat. And if nothing else, Peter, go ahead, take it away.
Thanks, Cesar. So today we're going to have Anant from the team demo to us the single VMSS AZ spanning feature, which we previewed back in December. So this lets you create a scale set which spans zones, and you can use it using a single node type. And then we will do our regular Q&A after that. So I'll hand it off to Anant to walk through this preview feature and show us a demo.
Hello, everyone. So thanks, Peter. So like Peter said, today we're going to talk about the AZ resilient solution of Service Fabric. So the current solution that we have, which is available for general availability, it requires customers to create 3 VMSS with each VMSS pinned to one zone. And basically the limitation of this solution is it is always a pain point for the customers to manage 3 VMSS and then place the workloads accordingly, set the placement constraints and all that, and then configure auto scaling per VMSS. So to reduce the pain for the customers, we previewed a solution last December. So with this, you just need one VMSS. And even though the number of nodes required in this will also remain the same, but you just need one VMSS which spans across 3 zones, and the placement constraints become simpler. You just need to place your workloads on this VMSS or the node type, and then the auto scale role just need to be configured for this particular VMSS, and it becomes management simpler. So if I go into this solution more, this also requires 15 nodes, which means you need to deploy at least 5 nodes per AZ. And this is a requirement because the underlying infrastructure updates that we have, they need at least 5 nodes to work reliably. So this diagram shows that there is just one node type, there is one VMSS, and there are 3 zones. And there is just one load balancer, which is configured for this VMSS. To go into the configuration details of this VMSS, basically in the VMSS settings, you just need to provide one property, which is called zones, and you need to mention the 3 zones here. And you need to set the zone balance to true. So we want you to set the zone balancing to true because for a cluster to survive a one zone down scenario, it is critical that the VM distribution is balanced across all zones. Let's say if balancing was not enabled and your cluster somehow went into a skewed state where one of the zones has 10 VMs and the other 2 zones have just 5 distributed amongst them. So if the zone which has 10 VMs goes down, your cluster will actually go down. So even though you have a AZ spanning VMSS, but your cluster is still not AZ resilient. So we want you to set the zone balance to true as well. And the good thing about this node type is that, and this VMSS is that you can scale up to 300 VMs within the same VMSS. The SF node type configuration for this is in the node type, you have to set this property multiple availability zones to true. And I'll talk about these 2 knobs over here, which are optional, but basically this is the only configuration that is required to have an AZ spanning VMSS. Now talking about these two configuration. So the first one is SF zonal upgrade mode. So this mode can be set to either hierarchical or parallel. So talking about the parallel first. So if you set this to parallel, um, all the UDs, basically you'll just, even though you have 15 nodes, you'll have just 5 UDs in the VMSS, which is what you have today. So, but we do not want you to set this. We want the default is the hierarchical. So when you set the SF zonal upgrade mode to hierarchical, what happens is the UDs are defined. UDs get the zone information as well. So instead of 5 UDs, you get 15 UDs. And the benefit is that whenever an upgrade is undergoing, the upgrade will happen in the first UD first. And once the first UD is upgraded, then only the upgrade will move to the next UD, the next zone, sorry. So it'll happen like this. First zone gets updated, the 5 UDs within that zone get updated, then the upgrade moves to the next zone. And we want you to configure this being the recommended way because as per SDP, this is what uh, the upgrade should be. You just upgrade one zone, everything is fine, you move to the next zone. With parallel, this will not happen because in parallel, you have just 5 UDs. If an upgrade starts, the UD0 of all the 3 zones will be upgraded at the same time. So this upgrade will be faster, but it is not as safe as the other one. That is why hierarchical is the recommended and the default way. Now coming to the VMSS zonal upgrade mode, this also has the same hierarchical and the parallel mode, and it also stands for the same things. So the VMSS updates, if this mode is set to parallel, they will go in parallel in all the zones. Basically, UD0 of all the zones getting upgraded at the same time, and then UD1 and UD2. And if you set this to hierarchical, first zone, the UDs within the first zone get upgraded, then the upgrade moves to the next zone. And even for this mode, the recommendation is hierarchical, but yeah, it is an option available to the customers, but we strongly recommend you to use hierarchical in both the upgrade modes. So right now in the previous solution, unfortunately, the hierarchical VMSS zonal upgrade mode is not available. But before we GA this solution, we will have both the modes supported. So I have a link to the public doc as well in this presentation, which you guys can take a look later. And we've documented all these things there, and we've provided the recommendations as well. So we uh, even though this solution is available as preview in all the public clouds, we suggest you not to use this solution in your prod cluster right now because it is a preview feature, and to use it in your prod only when it is available for GA. To give you some more details, so the fault domains now automatically get the zone information here. So now FD would be of this format. It would be hierarchical. It will have the zone information and then the FD values. The UDs, if you set the SF zonal upgrade mode to parallel, you will have a flat UD, just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you set the mode to hierarchical, you'll have the zone information populated in the UD as well. To give you some more details about the VMSS, so if you have a silver and above durability VMSS, you need to have at least 5 VMs per AZ. So for 3 AZs, you'll end up with 15 VMs. So this is the same VM count which was there in the earlier solution, just that this solution makes the management much simpler. For the bronze durability VMSS, where there is no infrastructure updates, where basically the VMSS updates are not orchestrated, here you need just 2 VMs per AZ. So in 3 zones, you just need 6 VMs. Another thing about this VMSS is that you need the standard load balancer. The basic load balancer doesn't work with the AZ spanning VMSS. So now I'm going to start a demo, and then we can take up questions after that. So this, Peter, is my screen visible to you guys?
Yep, we can see your screen.
Oh, okay. So this is a cluster which has the AZ spanning VMSS. There is just one VMSS, and so this is the VMSS. It has 15 VMs running on it, and it has 3 zones configured. And yeah, just go. So these are the 15 VMs which are running here. So if you look, I am using the default configuration here. So the upgrade domains are spread across 3 zones. So these are the 3 VMs which reside in zone 1. Sorry, 5 VMs. And then these 5 VMs also reside in zone 2, and these 5 reside in zone 3. And if you look at each of these VMs, we have the 5 VMs spread in 5 UDs and the 5 FDs. And since this is a silver durability VMS, you would notice that there are 3 infrastructure service instances, one for each of the 3 zones. So this one controls zone 1, this one controls zone 2, and this one controls zone 3. So right now there are no repair tasks which are active on any of these VMSS, but if I can start a tenant update, let's say I just reimage the VM5. So this belongs to zone 2. So in a couple of moments, we'll see a tenant update going on here. So similarly, we can start tenant update in all the 3 zones at the same time. So you'll see 3 tenant updates going on, all orchestrated by the infrastructure services. So just give it a minute. And you'll soon see the tenant update starting over here. And I think in the meantime, we can start taking questions if there are.
Yeah, feel free to send any questions in the chat or come off mute if you want to.
So like you see, 2 tenant updates have started already in 2 zones. The third one will also show up soon.
So we have one question from Whit. Is this functionality compatible with placement constraints?
Yes, you can use the placement constraints here. So basically, when you have a service and you set the placement constraint on your service to can be constrained to this particular node type, then let's say your service has 3 replicas. So the service fabric load balancing will ensure that each of the 3 replicas lands in a separate zone. So one replica will go on this VM, which is in zone 1, the other will go to zone 2, and the third will go to zone 3. And similarly, if you have 6 replicas, you'll have 2 replicas in each zone.
We have
Yeah. So I saw the next question. So basically, the underlying VMSS today does not allow changing these zone configuration. So you have to define all the 3 zones at the time of the VMSS creation itself.
To add on to that, Anand, if you did want to migrate to a cluster that uses availability zones, can you add a new node type and migrate traffic over to that new node type, which utilizes zones?
That's correct. So that would be the migration scenario. So you have a cluster which either has the previous solution or doesn't have any AZ resilient solution. So all you have to do is you add a new node type, which is AZ spanning, the one that I'm showing, and then you change the placement constraints for your services to move to this particular node type. And once your services are running on this node type, you could just remove the other node type.
Awesome. And we have another question from Whit, which is, given the Ignite announcement that VMSS now supports Spot and PG VMs in the same skill set, would this automatically handle that scenario as well? Or pay-as-you-go, sorry.
So the Spot VMSS, the support for Spot VMSS right now in SF is not available. We have been trying to make those available, but there, there isn't a way right now for us to provide a reliable solution to the customers. So the problem with Spot VMs is that, let's say, you created one node type which is AZ spanning, but you create another node type which is Spot, which has Spot VMs, and that has 100 VMs, and all of a sudden all those 100 VMs go down. So in this scenario, the entire cluster can itself go down because of how the ring itself is set up. So right now we do not have a reliable solution for Spot VMs. So we uh, do not have a support for Spot VMs right now in SF.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I guess that's almost exactly the scenario I had in mind. Is that seems like the service replication would work fine, but if all the VMs disappear with with all the replicas of your data, that's not ideal.
Correct. So so we have a solution for Spot VMs available to some of the internal customers, but we do not make it available to everyone because, like I said, it is not reliable, and we do not want customers to burn their fingers. So if someone is ready, they have just stateless workloads, they are fine to consider the cluster itself to be something that can just go away at one time. Maybe we can chat later and we can hook something up with for you, but that is not reliable is what I would say because of the nature of the Spot VMs.
Fair enough.
Okay, so the next question is if the entire AZ region goes down. Yeah, so this solution provides AZ resiliency, which means the cluster can withstand a zone going down, but for the entire region and all the zones going down, I don't think even this would be able to survive that.
So the next question is, are there any alternatives we can use in that case?
Okay, so maybe in that case, you need to have backup clusters or clusters across regions. Again, acting as backups to survive an entire region going down. But yeah, probably we can discuss it later. At least this solution doesn't handle the entire region going down.
Yeah, in that case, I would expect to have a backup cluster and a traffic manager or Azure Front Door in front of your active and passive clusters and direct traffic if an entire region were to go down. And the next question is again from Whit. How does this handle a single zone going down? Does it create a new zone and redeploy fresh copies, or does it wait for the existing one to come back online?
Yeah, so once a zone goes down, since you have enough nodes in the other two zones, the cluster will still work reliably. All your workloads will shift to the other two zones. And eventually, when the zone which went down recovers, the replicas and the services will be spread again back to the zone which went down. But yeah, so basically there are only three zones. So when one zone goes down, another zone doesn't come up.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay, what is the next step in that? We may open it up to all questions at this point.
Sure, I think that's fine. So I'll just close the demo then.
Yeah, thanks for the demo, Anant. So if you have any other questions, feel free to enter them in the chat or come off mute. When is the next SF release coming out? 8.0 as of yet? Any unannounced features coming with it? So 8.0 we are targeting for the end of this month to begin our rollout. Hopefully we should have it within the next couple of weeks, and by April your clusters should be updated to 8.0. One of the cool new features that we have coming out with 8.0 that I don't think we have spoken about yet is support for wave-based upgrades. So when your cluster is enrolled in automatic upgrades, instead of having to get the upgrade on your cluster as soon as it rolls out in a region, we're going to allow you to enroll in different waves. So there'll be wave 0 if you want to get the update as soon as possible, or you could choose to enroll in wave 1, which means you would get the automatic upgrade a week after the upgrade becomes available, or wave 2, which lets you wait for 2 weeks for that upgrade to become available. And we're implementing this based on a lot of feedback that we received where customers wanted to have their test clusters and staging clusters upgrade before their production clusters so they could catch any possible issues beforehand. So that is one of the exciting features we have coming out. The next question is from Jamie. What does the Managed Service Fabric service do for you? Do you still see all the same resources in your resource group? So the Service Fabric Managed Cluster Resource is a simplified ARM resource model which takes the underlying components that make up a service fabric cluster and encapsulates them into a single ARM resource. So when you're deploying your service fabric cluster, instead of having to define and configure all of the independent resources, such as your VM scale set, your load balancer, your virtual networks, instead you just create a service fabric managed cluster resource, and behind the scenes we'll deploy all of those underlying resources for you. And those resources still exist, and you can find them in another resource group called SFC_cluster ID. So you still have full access to those resources, but we would expect all of the operations on your cluster to come through the Service Fabric Managed Cluster resource. So if you're adding a new node type, or if you're trying to scale up and down your cluster, or you want to add a VM scale set extension, you would perform those operations on the Managed Cluster resource, and the resource provider will be able to validate the operations to ensure they won't have any negative impacts on your cluster. It's also going to remove a lot of the steps that are required to complete those operations. So things like removing a node type. Previously, you had to disable a lot of nodes, and then you would have to actually disable the VMs and then remove the scale set itself. That is now a single step operation when you're using a managed cluster. Okay, next question is from Eduardo again. Can you expand on the new feature that would allow us to have multiple instances of a stateless service in the same node? Example, instances will be under the same name service app my service. Is that coming with SF version 8.0? If not wrong, yes, Eduardo, that will be available in the 8.0 release. So you will be able to create multiple stateless instances that do exist on the same node. Another question from Jamie, does it use Active Directory or certificates with the managed SF service? So with the Service Fabric managed clusters, we actually provide and manage the cluster certificate for you. So you're no longer responsible for rotating your certificate or providing new certificates. And you do provide a thumbprint, either a client certificate, or you can use AAD for client authentication to the cluster. So when you're connecting to the cluster, you can choose to use AAD or provide your own certificate, but the cluster certificate is no longer your responsibility. Next question from Whit. I've been reading all about Project Orleans actors over the last month. The actors enjoy streaming support, which better allows for an RX observable-like approach for interactions between actors. Further, there's all manner of research papers illustrating actor-oriented distributed systems. Is there any effort being done to do the same with SF actors, which are more consistent than SF? I've been looking at hosting Trill in a distributed capacity on SF actors, but the lack of the above has put little roadblocks in that effort. I don't have a great answer for this, Whit. Maybe Nantini or Anant have any ideas. Otherwise, we can try and follow up offline to get some better answers around this.
Yeah, we should follow up offline for this. We can hook you up with the owners of the actors.
Great. Any updates on mixed OS clusters, Windows and Linux?
Unfortunately, we still do not have any updates on the mixed OS support clusters.
I guess I went and created tickets on a couple of the items from last month's call, but haven't seen a movement on them, so I just want to follow up.
Yeah, that is good feedback. We definitely need to take a look at that and ensure we're following up on those. So we'll make sure that we take a look at them this week.
Okay, well, I guess more questions then. Is .NET 5 support definitely coming with the 8.0 release?
Yes, .NET 5 support will definitely be GA'd with the 8.0 release.
Well, will that include fixes for the binary serialization, or is that stick with the workaround for now?
I believe it does include the fixes, but I don't want to say yes for sure on that.
I guess any updates on what was it, the generic host support?
Not that I am aware of. Anthony, do you know if we've made some progress there?
No, I didn't get the question.
Just the long-running ticket item. Any updates on generic host support?
Oh, okay.
ASP.NET.
Okay. I think sorry about the we'll try to see if we can get an answer before the next call. At least some update. I don't know if we'll have a solution by then, but yeah.
Sure.
I have an update. But yeah, thanks for like always voicing out your concerns and like creating issues. I see that like yeah. But yeah, we'll try to even for the GitHub issues, we'll see if we can provide some update before the next call.
Right.
And I think I see a great questions or feedback on the cross AZ, great questions on that front. So if anybody have tried public preview of the cross AZ that Anand demoed, and if you see any bugs or issues, feel free to create raise it in the GitHub issues so that we can keep Anand and his team in the loop. And any scenarios that you want to see post GA also, please use the GitHub repo. Anybody has tried it? Like anybody has explored with the preview? Okay, there's a question on any official support for cross-region deployments plus the easy feature today. So I think the cross-AZ GA is coming out in 8.0, which means you'll get official support. Cross-region deployments, Peter, are you aware of anything coming on the roadmap? Or you or Anand?
Not for Azure deployed clusters. It's still gonna only be available through deploying the standalone Service Fabric runtime and creating your own cluster which spans regions. We do have teams that are doing that, so it is possible. It can be a little bit tricky to configure, but that would be the recommendation for now if you need a cross-region deployment of your cluster. Also, if anyone has any feedback on managed clusters from their usage, we would be really grateful to hear about that. Another question from Eduardo, does Microsoft use cross-region clusters internally? And I see Matt has joined the call now, so he might be able to give a good answer for that question.
Yeah, there's some. We don't talk about what they do. But the Service Fabric runtime has supported multi-region or multi-AZ for a decade. There used to be, I think, a public case study where we talked about some of the usage within Skype. Hopefully that answers things.
Any chance of seeing more of the behind-the-scenes use of SF with Microsoft projects internally, things like event hubs on YouTube? I think that is a great question. I think that is something that we would really like to do. I don't know that we have anything planned in the near future, but I definitely would expect us to create more content like that in the future.
No doubt COVID's kind of getting in the way of that. Hard to kind of drop in people's offices these days, but those videos are always really interesting to just kind of, the feature dive-ins of, pieces of Service Fabric itself, and then just how different, internal customers are using it.
Absolutely. Definitely would be great to have. Back to disaster recovery. For smaller clusters, we host small clients. Active passive model seems expensive, as in we're paying for passive/disaster recovery cluster not in use. An option would be re-provision the entire cluster, although need to check SLAs. Do we have a low-cost alternative? What kind of alternative are you looking for here, Eduardo? Would you be able to redeploy your cluster quickly, or what are you looking for instead of the active passive model? Similar to Azure Site Recovery for single VMs. Adnan, do you have any thoughts around this?
Yeah, let me just go through the question once. On the question of a low-cost alternative, unfortunately, right now we don't have. The solution that we have of having 15 VMSs, 15 VMs within the VMS, AZ spanning VMSs is the least that is there. We are trying to find a solution to make it more cost effective, but yeah, we don't have any timelines for that.
Next question. So when is the new SFX leaving beta? I am not sure about that date. Anthony, are you aware?
No, I don't have the timelines yet. But what is your what is the concern, or what is the what are you looking
Not
for?
really a concern. I've just been seeing the click here to view the the SF Explorer, now in beta for a while now. So just curious, when's it coming out of beta?
Oh, okay. But I think given that SFX is open source, I think we are good at like providing updates there in the open source repo. So whenever the next, yeah. But if I don't have a time or an answer yet, but I can find out, or we can I can let the team know, and so they can provide an update in the repo as well.
Sure.
Thanks. Would love to have a 9-node cross AZ cluster support. Yeah, I think that we also would love to have that. And as Anand said, we are looking at improvements to be more cost effective for the cross AZ scenario. Yeah, please continue to give us more feedback. So when we have a timeline in place and we are ready to share more information, we will publish it in a docs or in a blog post. Feel free to ask the question, or like now we're done with the presentation. You're allowed to mute yourself, so unmute and ask the question if you don't want to type.
I guess since it's kind of a slow on the question thing, I'll ask someone else's question that I at least saw in the Yammer thing. I guess someone had posted a question on Stack Overflow asking about limits on, I pasted the link to it in chat, but what are the limits on the actor events? So is there, he was experiencing, just timeouts occurring around enormous numbers of subscriptions. Are there any, known limits for events between actors?
Matt, do you have any answers?
So there's no hard limit. Looking at the number there, it might just be a performance issue. We would have to know a lot more about what the resource consumption was in the environment to understand what the actual problem was. But there's no hard limit or no known, we don't like cap it or anything like that. It's not clear whether or not increasing the partition count would help or not, right? That might spread it around a little bit, but if the machines are all pegged already, then that's not gonna help anything.
Sure.
So uncertain, but it's definitely not a hard limit imposed anywhere in the stack.
Sure. Cool.
So I think last time Waldo had a question regarding actors around feature enhancements, and I noticed there was another feature enhancement in there. The response on that one was more of, we're looking for community development. So, and then when I looked at the repo, it looked like the last, at least real commits, were probably about 2 years ago. So is there going to be any effort kind of echoing some of those questions to at least get closer in features with what's available for, say, Orleans? Or is Orleans kind of really intended as to use grains or something like that.
So there's not really a statement one way or the other about which people should use. They both have different sets of features. And so we expect customers to kind of try both out and see which features or which functionality matters the most to them. Having an integrated model with Service Fabric, provides some benefits. Having a completely abstracted thing with Orleans with different sets of features, works better for other types of applications. Regarding that there haven't been many changes, yeah, we haven't seen many people adding things on, and the workloads that people are using today haven't required some of those features out of SF. Maybe those folks are just all using Orleans or aka.net or something else that suits their needs, but people haven't found a desire to add those features into the Service Fabric actors at this time. That doesn't mean that they couldn't be, but I think people are so far kind of choosing different actor platforms based on the features that are exposed today. We welcome the contributions. I don't see any problem with the Service Fabric actor model getting richer.
Yeah, I guess to that end, I guess is what I was asking, in the sense that, are you looking instead more towards the community to develop the features as opposed to kind of adding them? The response in the particular scenario was that Microsoft would be willing to provide support for adding the features, but it wasn't like, hey, yeah, we're going to take this up and do the work. So that's kind of what I was getting to, because I mean the open source part has kind of been, I would say, more recent, if you will, as opposed to from the beginning. So having not started out in the OSS, mindset there, I was just wondering if that's part of the lack of contribution, or if that's the reason, in that regard.
It's probably just that fewer people know even. I mean, the actor model did not start out open source, and so probably fewer people even are aware that they could contribute. But I think that the statement that we would accept contributions, work to take them in, help people out with them, support them once they were in, stuff like that, is accurate, right? It's just that we haven't seen people actually do that. They tend to go, well, if I'm going to contribute some feature or some functionality, they know about Orleans and they go to Orleans, and that's fine, right? I mean, they're both supported platforms in these different scenarios. I don't know if that's actually answering your question or not. So.
It is to some degree. I'm just looking more towards, if the direction is yes. I mean, it sounded like that Microsoft would be willing to support anything is from an open source perspective, and your point about the actors being more recently open sourced is also, I think, quite fair. I was just looking if there was, if at least in my mind, I have quite a few features that I can think of that I could throw in there, but I don't always have the time to actually contribute, in that arena. And so I was just curious if more features were even added than what was there, if that's something that the Service Fabric team would seriously consider, or if really right now it's just more looking towards the community. That's the.
What do you mean by seriously consider? Like.
Well, I say seriously consider. I mean, like if it was flooded with like 50 more requests for features, would the team say, oh, you know what, let's actually start matching Orleans and some of what Orleans features, as far as like, say like a journaled actor or, some of those pieces, or even the one that was, in there is around, directly accessing some of the message capabilities. So I'm just saying, like, if more features were added, would a dev get assigned and actually do that, or would you look more towards the community to fulfill those requests? I guess is what I'm asking.
I think it would depend on the feature. Certainly some things would go faster, with the experts that we have in place. But if it's something entirely new, then it's probably more of a looking to the community and getting helping with guidance, helping with the process necessary to actually do a release. I mean, let me put it this way. There's certainly a greater chance that Microsoft does the implementation the more people pile on, right? But the more people pile on, there's also a greater chance that we can work together rather than you just waiting for us to do these implementations on our own. So I can't make a broad statement which way it would go. It's going to be feature specific and it's going to depend on what the demand is, right? If only one person wants something, then we, kind of have to make a decision based on the overall priority. I mean, another thing that people have done is they just take Orleans or aka.net and they run it on top of Service Fabric if it's already got all the features. So it's really about making sure that everyone's time is valued, right? You might get more mileage out of running some services built on aka, some built on Orleans, some built on Service Fabric actors. There's, different platforms for the reason. But as to, if I open up a request for feature X, what happens? It depends upon all the customers that express that desire for the same thing, and it depends on what the actual feature is.
Yeah, that's perfectly fair. Yeah, I agree with that.
We're not stonewalling anything, right? I mean, we'd love to see contributions. It's just that most people haven't bothered and haven't asked.
Hey, to that end, what's the word on doing all SF development out of this the public repo, and increasingly not on y'all's internal duplicated one?
Yeah. Is Anthony still here?
to repeat to beat that horse some more.
Yeah.
I think Anthony had to actually hop off.
Okay. So work is still ongoing to get things into a shape where we can reasonably build the Windows and Linux branches of the code publicly. We're not there yet. It's amazingly complicated to separate out all of the internal stuff that we have accumulated in terms of build systems and stuff. So that is definitely work that is ongoing, but it's not there yet. And so, that's a bummer, but it's definitely something that we want to do because it does help with transparency. The regular request for roadmap, there's one way to look at the roadmap, which is we can always try and do our best to document what we're working on and discuss it with you folks. But the other way is you can see what the commits are doing. So not yet, but still working on it.
Cool.
Wait, I'll just add that I know it was talked about last community call, but the current intention or path is to get the public repo in sync within a couple of days, ideally, or within, from our internal. I don't think we've actually specifically talked, I know Matt mentioned this, but specifically talked about making the public repo the actual only place, the source of truth, if you will. So we'll have more to talk about there, but we want to make sure that the public repo is at least in sync within a couple of days of any release. I think that'll make people happy, right? Initially.
Yeah.
So
and yeah, just being able to see if I submit a pull request, then it'll go somewhere. There's I guess there's that typo in the services.xml that's been there for years.
Yep.
And there's of course a pull request for it, but it doesn't go anywhere because the repo is not the public one's not really used yet.
It's fair, yeah. So I know Anthony had a drop. So last we spoke, I'll just repeat. Target was mid-March for Linux stuff. Target for April for Windows. So I know it's mid-March right now. So we'll have to have her follow up and see if we can get that announced in some sort of channel we have today.
Great. Well, I've run out of questions for today, so.
I think I said one last one, and we're running short on time. So, question on stopping a VM scale set. I think Peter earlier I joined midway through due to a conflict. I think Peter talked earlier about the plans around managed clusters and some thoughts around extracting the system services out into a managed thing. In that scenario where the system services are running remotely, if the workload is, of course, stateless, it'd be possible to stop the VM scale set and then turn it back on later and have the apps get redeployed. So that is a scenario that is coming. It's going to take some time to get working correctly. And so I think maybe the managed preview of managed service fabric clusters is a place where you can start to evaluate those scenarios. I don't know if the preview supports that one yet, but that is one of the things that we've talked about in that context.
I don't think it does, Pat, but
yeah, we got to get there.
So the next release of managed clusters will have will most probably have the stateless node type as well.
And in that mode or the system services remote.
I'm not sure if Brain in the Jar will be there. I'm not sure.
It will not. No.
Okay, we'll get there eventually. But yeah, that's the direction. That's one of the things that we are considering. Today, it's not
Awesome,
really doable.
thanks.
Yeah. Today, it will destroy your stuff, so don't do it. Okay. I think that wraps it for the week. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We'll share the recordings to the YouTube and the Azure Connection program soon.
Okay. Thanks, Cesar.
Thank you, team. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.